To be continued. St. Petersburg, Russia, where Vladimir Putin's economic forum is ongoing, has once again been attacked by Ukrainian drones. At night, Ukrainian drones struck the arsenals of the Russian Federation's navy and a base in Kronstadt, as well as an oil depot in Kuban, but not only there. Overall, dozens of targets in Russia and in the occupied territories of Ukraine came under attack. And importantly, these attacks coincided with a warning from Volodymyr Zelensky. Now it is clear why. Zelensky openly addressed Vladimir Putin with a proposal for peace. Immediately after Putin refused a personal meeting, Zelensky announced a wave of massive attacks on Russia. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine stated that Vladimir Putin missed his last chance to end this war without large-scale consequences for Russia. And right after that, drones and missiles headed for Russia. But insiders claim that Ukraine has really prepared several waves of truly massive attacks on Russia. Moreover, a real collapse has begun in the occupied Crimea. Ukrainian drones have brought an important logistics route under effective fire control of the occupiers in the occupied south. This is the road from Melitopol to Crimea through Chonhar, and in fact Crimea has ended up under blockade. My name is Aleksei Pechiy, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write any comment you want. And subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News, the link to it is in the description of this video. So, on the night of June 6, Ukrainian drones struck the arsenals of the Russian Navy and the base in Kronstadt, as well as an oil depot in Kuban. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine reported this. Here is his quote. Last night, our drones covered a distance of about 1,000 kilometers to the St. Petersburg region, to the enemy navy's arsenals, and to the bases in Kronstadt. And our long-range sanctions also covered about 500 kilometers to the Krasnodar region and struck an oil depot. The attack was carried out jointly by the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Security Service of Ukraine, and the main intelligence directorate. Strikes on Russian territory are being carried out because the Russian leader wants to wage war, so Ukrainian sanctions are being enforced for this aggression. Russia needs to end its war and stop attacking lives. Any rule of injustice, and Ukraine will receive a just response. Thank you to our warriors for their accuracy. Well, before we analyze all the consequences of these attacks in detail, I want to draw your attention to the rhetoric of the President of Ukraine. Last night, on June 5th, right after Vladimir Putin responded to the open letter from the Ukrainian president proposing to end the war and meet in person, Zelensky stated, quote, "Unfortunately, the Russian side is once again choosing war. Everyone heard today's response, a weak response. He simply doesn't want to end the war. Putin doesn't want to change anything or admit that the war benefits only him and his inner circle who are taking money from him. That means Russia should have less money, and the pressure on Russia should increase." And what did Volodymyr Zelensky do then? He announced new strikes on Russia, like we, Ukraine, offered Russia peace. We offered a meeting. Russia refused. That means Ukraine will only intensify its attacks on Russian territory and will simply burn out Russian oil logistics so that they don't make money. Moreover, today the head of Ukraine's foreign ministry, Andrei Sybiga, stated that dictator Putin missed his last chance to get out of the war that has been a failure for him. According to Sybiga, Putin's refusal is bad news for Russians, as the situation for Russia will only get worse. Here is his quote, "Losses on the battlefield will increase. Failures will become increasingly humiliating. The economy will sink deeper into recession. More jobs will be lost. Taxes will rise, and inflation will hit the most vulnerable segments of the population. There are no longer any safe places in the Russian Federation that could be exempt from Ukrainian strikes. From now on, the intensity of attacks will continue to increase." That's why it's more than obvious now why exactly Zelensky published this open letter. It's a letter to Putin calling for peace. Now, after Vladimir Putin's actual refusal to engage in dialogue, he directly said, "I don't want to meet. I want denazification, demilitarization, to achieve goals by military means and so on." After this refusal from Putin, Ukraine gets a full carte blanche for massive attacks across all of Russia. And if Russians are unhappy with these attacks, now they know exactly who refused peace. That's Vladimir Putin, that's the kind of multi-step game he's playing. Now let's move on to the consequences of the night attack. The defeat of at least 7 targets has been confirmed, plus the Tyumen oil refinery burned down, and that's only what has been confirmed so far. And what I'm going to mention next doesn't include substations and other less significant targets. The main target of the attack was Leningrad Oblast. On the night of June 6, Ukrainian defense forces carried out a series of successful strikes on sites where ammunition is stored. Repairs and combat readiness maintenance of the Russian Federation's ships in the Baltic Sea are being carried out. Strikes were carried out on the 15th Arsenal of the Russian Navy in Leningrad Oblast at the Kronstadt Naval Base, and the Security Service of Ukraine noted, quote, "By Such special operations weaken the enemy's Baltic fleet. The affected facilities are used for storing ammunition, repairing, and supporting the combat activities of ships. Putting them out of action complicates the enemy's logistics, reduces the fleet's combat readiness, and limits Russia's ability to operate in the Baltic region." In addition, the Petergovskaya oil depot was hit, which is located in the city of Lomonosov in the Leningrad region. In particular, a hit, explosion, and fire at the facility have been recorded. A strike was also carried out on the Nest oil terminal in Neste in the city of Lomonosov Leningrad region, and the terminal is on fire. At the same time, the arsenal of the missile weapons storage complex, ammunition, and military equipment of the Logistics Support Center of VPGT Bolshaya Izhora, Leningrad region, was hit. Explosions are occurring at the site, with secondary detonations and a fire reported.
In short, the warehouses and rails are burning with all those munitions. Everything over there is exploding non-stop. The windows are shaking and everything's trembling.
At the same time, Ukrainian defense forces struck the Ust-Labinsk oil depot in the Krasnodar region. According to the Security Service of Ukraine, after a series of explosions, a large fire broke out there, and at least 3 storage tanks containing petroleum products caught fire.
Subtitles added by Dimitor.
And by the way, this is a very important target in Kuban, I emphasize, Ukrainian Kuban. Because this very oil depot that was attacked is an important rear hub for storing and supplying fuel to Russian troops in the southern and eastern directions. This is again part of the armed forces of Ukraine's broader strategy. Because today, the command of the 3rd Separate Special Operations Forces Regiment of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, named after Prince Sviatoslav the Brave, announced that Ukrainian drones have effectively taken fire control over an important logistics route of the occupiers in the occupied south. This is the road from Melitopol to Crimea. In essence, this means that logistics to the occupied Crimea through Chonhar are completely blocked. This means that Crimea is effectively in a semi-blockade. They only have the Crimean bridge left. And by the way, that bridge can also be targeted. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.